Oda must have paid Michael Buffer to hang out with him, man, while he just draws One Piece, man. Because it's time. That's what kind of energy we've been getting from these chapters when it comes to the level of hype. How y'all be? My fellow hairless mix of the blue sea. It's me. We back in the building, hot and fresh, man. 10:55. Good time to be alive. Um, Yesterday was wild. Some of the streams people were doing, and today, hanging out with my goat, King Recon D Goatbeard, and the boys. Shout out to all of them. Shout out to TCB. Apparently, they're gonna have a schedule change now. Like Jagger came out late for me, and I'm like, oh, this is how it used to be. I'm cool with this, but apparently going forward, whatever time the chapter came out for you, wherever time zone you're in, that's probably going to be the new release time. So that's good to know. And real quick before I get into the chapter, I just want to talk about the interview with Oda and the creator of Detective Conan. One of the things I liked about it a lot was Oda's take on how he feels about the comedy in the series and how it's very important to him. Because I feel the same way. You guys know I bring it up all the time. The goofiness in the series is one of the allures of it, right? The hype and the story building. Yeah, I like those things. Like obviously they're very important, but the comedy aspect and it's One Piece in its essence. And so when you hear Oda talk about something like Tom and Jerry, right? When we had all the memes during Gear Fifth about Luffy tunes and Toon Force and the Popeye thing, he's grabbing lightning, he's laughing, he's doing all these wacky things. It's like it is cool. Like most of us pretty much, we've all watched those same cartoons. So even though this is One Piece and that's totally different, they're the same. It felt connected. It felt cool to watch those two talk about something like that. And even though I've never really followed that series, Detective Conan, I think everybody's seen an episode or two. It's been on for almost 30 years now. But the other reason why I like this is because I'm a big fan of Conan O'Brien, who has been to Conan Town and, started off as a joke. He does these things where he travels to different countries and, well, he was before the pandemic. And one of the things he does when he goes, actually the first thing usually when he goes to another country is he'll go they'll do a skit, where they'll go to a place where they teach you etiquette for that country, or region or something, or wherever. Because I don't think is it always. Yeah, so far it's always been a country. Yeah, it hasn't been anything like, oh, I went to New Hampshire or something. It's usually out of the states. So that's one of the things he usually does is learn some etiquette and how to interact with the people there. And the Japanese lady who was and her assistant who was teaching these things, they were funny, man. They were actually funny. That cracked me up. But that's what I was thinking about when I was reading the interview, like how all these things tie together. I've been watching Conan O'Brien my whole life. I've been reading One Piece for half my life. Like I said, I wasn't really into Detective Conan. I've seen a few episodes, but just having that connection and then the Tom and Jerry thing, like all these things, just like yeah, this is good to know. I enjoy reading SBSs, but the interviews they hit different for me. Like an interview like that, just because of the person he was talking to, because these guys are fans too. They're fanboys just like us, like even more so because they're so much of a fan, they made this their life. You know what I mean? Like, who's a bigger fan than someone that makes this their life? I get people want money and stuff too as a career, but for what those guys go through creating these stories, and we all know how this industry can be, you have to be a fanboy. You have to be. There's just no way around it. That was really enjoyable. But anyway, enough of that. It's chapter time, 10:55. It's a new age up in here, boy. And it's a new age for Green Bull. Because, man, he got hold this chapter. Look, when Raizo came in with the Goyaka no Jutsu, I anticipated before. I hope I'm not the only one. it should have been obvious that he had some countermeasure to deal with fire, or else he probably wouldn't be an admiral. Like, it just wouldn't make any sense. His ability seems the easiest to counter without having to do much. So the fireproof force was dope. I did like that. I don't know how he did it because you can't tell what he's doing necessarily. I don't know if this is a army hockey thing, or does he make his forest more damp and harder to burn or something like that. I don't know. We'll find out, I'm sure. Maybe it's clearer in the viz, or I don't know. Maybe we have to wait to the anime. It might not even be important for now. But I did want to see how he interacted with fire because he had beat King and Queen, which you would think he would be at a disadvantage. Even by, I just mean by his ability, not necessarily his strength, but what his ability is supposed to do, since a lot of these abilities have some sort of weakness to them. And it would make sense, right? Now, he might not have a countermeasure to deal with ice, because the opposite spectrum of fire, being ice, is something else that could destroy a forest too. So the Yamato thing, like I had brought up, Yamato not being part of the fight, I could see, like, I agree. I think Greenville was still won regardless. But like I said last week, whether you beat the Scabbers and go on, you're not running through the boss Jim Boski, Mr. Prince, hailing in from the south side of Shimosuke Village, the Senpai of the Santoryu, and the goat with the coat, the rubber band man, the phenom from Fuchsia, Monkey D. Luffy. That wouldn't happen. You're getting clapped, son. It's just not. It's not that type of party. And something I talk about in the series all the time is, regardless of how strong you are, it only takes 2 to 3 characters to beat you. We know that almost for a fact now at this point in the story, that regardless of how strong you are, 2 to 3 characters that's really strong is taking you out the game. It's just it's a way that Oda has maintained some sort of balance even at the top. And people talk about admirals and yonkos and all that. You guys know how I feel about that stuff. I don't care what you like, whatever side you're on. If you're on a side, to me, the top tier is just the top tier, and that's it. It usually just comes down to matchup and circumstance, like a lot of fights in general, not just in One Piece, but that's just how stuff is done. A lot of it's circumstantial. The thing that's crazy though, that I overlook with Green Bull is weird in a way where it's like, you're an Akainu fanboy, right? You're also into prejudiceness. I don't even know if that's a word, but that's his thing. Like, he gets down with that in the hierarchy nonsense. I don't understand giving the Scabbers an opportunity not once but twice. That's not something Akainu would do, and that's something that I've been saying, is that they're not the same character. Just because he name drops Akainu, we did get the impression like, oh, he's going to try to be like Akainu. And he kind of did, but he was in over his head. He didn't understand the forces that were around him. Obviously, one of them nobody knew until it was too late. But again, even without Shank showing up, Greenville still would have lost, or he would have had to leave. You know what I mean? But I did enjoy Momo doing what he did, because it adds more depth to his character about things that we know were going to be added to his character and how he feels, right? Outside of the whining, Momo's like a character I really like. He's not one of my favorite characters, but I like Momo a lot. Actually, I gotta stop calling him Momo. Just like Sabo, these guys got name changes. He's Shogunosuke now, and what he told the Green Bull, and why he didn't want Yamato to fight wasn't something I thought about. I heard other people say it, and I was like, huh, that's interesting. Wasn't really on that. I honestly didn't really think about. I thought about it for a second, like why he would say that, but his reasoning was very insightful. Which again, he's been insightful from day one, and him learning about himself and dealing with insecurities, right? Because he knows, like, I'm not Odin, and I can't do this and I can't do that, but it's not going to stop him from doing something just because of some of the positive influence that Luffy and Zoro specifically, like what he was mentioning, to Yamato, like, look, you guys, I can't be at peace if you're still here, because that means you're not doing what you want to do, right? Yamato was literally chained to a rock for a portion of her life. and she's never had her own life. And for her to still have the type of personality that she has, you need to see that come out in full display and let Yamato be whoever Yamato is going to be, because we know a little bit about her, but Yamato doesn't even know who she is yet. I think she's gotten over the Odin thing a little bit, but something that Laz, shout out to the homie Laz, you already know what time it is. He had mentioned yesterday, was like, look, well, from the standpoint of learning about yourself, you can't do that if you're stuck in the same environment in the way that Wano is constructed, right? It's just not possible. And her dream is not, I won't say her dream, but one of the things she wants to do is travel. It's not just stay in Wano and be in Wano her whole life. Like, that's all she knows at this point. That's almost 3 decades of just, whoa, no. Wow, man, what? What clap Kaido, cuz, and just Onigashima all day long. You know what I mean? Wanting to be Odin and knowing about the prophecies and knowing about these things in the story that nobody else really knows about. I'm pretty sure there's probably like 10 people in the verse that knows what's in Odin's logbook, that same type of information. There's probably a little bit more than that, but you get my point. So him feeling that strong, and it just brought me back to the execution floor, with Shogunosuke, and like Kaido basically antagonizing him again, like after he didn't kill his family, basically, took his pops out. We don't know what's up with Toki. That's still technically a question mark issue, but for all intents and purposes, the only family member he had is Kinemon. It really is Kinemon. He doesn't know he already was a thing. Like, as far as he knows, it's Kinemon and Kanjuro, and Kanjuro was on some nonsense. So his closest friend and his closest relationship is Kinemon, Luffy, and Zoro. They the ones who, on an individual standpoint, have spent the most time with him, right? He's been with Kinemon since day one. Luffy and Shogunosuke spent some time together on Punk Hazard, right? When Luffy was telling him, like, hey, you need to chill with all this crying and all that nonsense. So I like that it popped back up again in the story where he still kept crying anyway, because that's not something that an 8-year-old would just be able to, okay, I don't cry anymore about that. It doesn't work. I won't say it never has happened like that before, but especially for those you with kids, ain't no way that they just stop crying. They don't, you can't just break a habit that quickly, right? It's just not going to happen. So little by little, Oda's had him be less whiny, but he's been in a lot of desperation situations. Like, Kaido literally baby dangled him on some Michael Jackson type stuff and was getting ready to drop him, again. In a situation with the castle and everything he's supposed to represent, he has all this pressure on him, to be great. Like, Odin named him what his name is for a reason. You know what I mean? Because he's supposed to be great. So he just has everything. That type of stuff could crush somebody, or have a negative outcome. But Momo refuses for that to be the case, because he sees how bad the people in Wano are oppressed, right? He lived through it himself. Orochi or Hochi, right? Pretty much the same thing happened to him in a way as Shogunosuke. If you think about it, we don't know the full details, but if the Kurozumi, basically, the way that at least Granny Shaman portrayed it, she could have been lying, but the Kurozumi were basically the oppressed family, like on some branch house, Hyuga clan type stuff. So Orochi grew up a certain way, basically the same way that Momo could have ended up growing up, but because of Orochi's mentality, he chose to want to be the oppressor, right? He wants to continue the cycle instead of breaking it. Momo's going through the same thing, right? Pop was boiled alive, man. He was just that's it. That's it. And just no Hiyori, no Toki, no Odin, no home. The home you have is in despair. There's people literally here in a situation where infanticide is a realistic option for dealing with what you're dealing with. Anytime that's the situation, it don't get no darker than that. So for Momo to be able to be like, look, I get that Raizo's Goyaku Jitsu didn't work against you because of this whole situation with Fireproof Forest. Like again, we that's something that should have been obvious because why would you have a power like that and not understand fire was going to be an issue? Ice, that's another story. Maybe we see that but if we do, it won't be from Yamato. And y'all know I was already talking about like, oh, he might have to deal with Aokiji. Of course, Shanks just negated all of that, but that was kind of the idea that I had because it just made too much sense for him to not understand as an admiral, like, hey, fire bad. But Raizo, man, yeah, Raizo looking like a prune, boy. I don't know. Hey, look, Edo Tensei might be in effect because Abe Hokage is looking dire, you know? It looked like he tried to walk into the village of the sand, got lost like Zoro, and ran out of water. It's just rough that way. But just yeah, oh, you know, him telling Yamato to stand down for that reason. Like, no, you know, yes, you'll always have a home in Wano. You can always come here whenever you want. But you a Mugiwara now. You know what I'm saying? You're not, your father doesn't matter anymore. He's out of the picture. You go with the Straw Hats and you go live the life that you should have been able to be free to go live a long time ago. I can't look you in the face and tell you that everything is okay in Wano if I can't deal with this. Which makes sense. Again, that's a metric ton of insight for somebody who, yeah, technically he's 28 years old, but he's not really 28 years old. That's a lot of insight, and that's the part about most characters I like. This entire time, right? Watching him step by step, trying to overcome obstacles and continuing to fail. This isn't like with Luffy where eventually he just overcomes it like that same obstacle that same day. You know what I mean? That hasn't been the case with Momo. You know, so like I said, it's one of those things for me where Momo's not my favorite character. I think he's a cool character though. And in the future he's gonna be that dude. That's why he's Shoganosuke. And you gotta put some respect on his name. That's just what we from now on. Sometimes I'm still gonna call him Momo, but you might, you know, it's Shoganosuke now, man. Ruler of Wano. It is what it is. He still got packed up though, because I mean, come on, dog. Like, if Momo beat Green Bull, people would drop the series. Like, you start to hear people talk like that. Like, all right, man, what are we doing? Like, because Boro, honestly, his breath blast attack doesn't even deserve to have a name, right? Kaido's didn't even deserve to have a name because it never did anything to anybody. But the fact that he actually was able to finally do it is pretty impressive. If you think about, it's not like he's had a devil fruit for years, man. Like, he's only had his abilities for a few months now. So, at some point he was going to be able to do something, right? He didn't achieve things necessarily as fast as he wanted to with the flame clouds, but the learning curve for Boro Breath was way shorter, right? So, and you know, again, he's still biting people, which it kind of makes sense given that he's a dragon, and you know, he doesn't know anything. Just like Luffy. Remember when he first got the Gomu Gomu? You seen what he was doing with his arm? Bouncing off of stuff and then not bouncing and just doing. Like, I still remember the one clip or the one in the volume 60 when he was aiming at the sign and he missed the sign and punched the old man out before the old man had told him about he was actually glad because Ace, you know how Ace felt about Roger, but the old man had told Ace that Roger was a great man and he actually did him a favor because they wasn't ready for the pirate life like how they thought they was. They would have died, you know, and this man lived a very long life after that. So that kind of thing, you know, those little things in the story, I always trip off of stuff like that. But one day Momo is going to be a beast, man. He's going to be hard to deal with. You know, he had a little training from the Senpai to Santo Ryu, and you know what I'm saying? But a long time ago, I said what was going to go on with Yamato because how are they going to take care of Wano? Your country is somewhat unstable. People know that there was a war in Wano. Like, people who are in the know who would want to take advantage of that. They're aware of what happened in Wano, and they'll be on their way. And then, of course, we had Green Bull pop up, and there you go. But Green Bull was a ho, like 100%. I'm talking just top, just is that was terrible. Like, I already, I stopped liking him as soon as he opened his mouth, and started saying that nonsense about prejudice and all that. You already know I get down with stuff like that. We don't. So and I didn't care what happened to him after that. But I thought like, oh, at least he'll have some good fights, or he'll be strong after, because of the introduction, how he dealt, well, not his first introduction, but his introduction to combat, it was through King and Queen. So it's like, okay, cool. Now the fire thing, Fireproof Forest, and I know that they're not on the same level. All right, Sabo is not Momo, so him using fire is probably a totally different situation to begin with. But it does make it interesting because, again, Green Bull's not that thorough like a Kainu. So since we're in an agenda area for a little bit, we've already accused Fujitora of basically probably of not aiding Sabo's escape. But like I was saying earlier, the part I didn't really notice about Green Bull is he was giving opportunities. Well, what is the opportunity Green Bull gave? The Rev was like, yo, if you just don't do X, you can skate. Which I find that hard to believe. I'm not saying that this would happen, right? You came on a celestial fishbowl territory and was wilding out. So I don't necessarily think they would be offered that opportunity by Green Bull, but it's just that Green Bull is not, he's not a Kainu. He's just not. In the same way he wouldn't have been, nobody in the verse is 1v1 in the world. Kaido couldn't even do it, and that's whoa, no. And he couldn't even do it. Whitebeard at some point that he would have got worn down. Like, it's just something that happens in the series. Oda makes sure you understand that none of these characters are not invincible. At some point Blackbeard might be the closest to that, but we don't know how hockey affects him yet because he hasn't been in a fight where nobody was going to use it against him. They would like the fact that we joke about stuff in the series and we have these moments and stuff, right? But it's kind of like a flip-flop of that situation where you have somebody like Akainu who went to go meet the Blackboard Pirates. Blackboard? They're not drawing with chalk. The Blackbeard Pirates by himself, solo dolo, as far as we know, right? I'm sure other people were on the ship, but they're probably all fodder or something. But when he went to the meetup spot, he was going to it was on and popping. And Blackbeard was like, yo, this is not what I want right now. Let's bounce. Because they probably would have lost. Knowing Blackbeard, right? If he thought the crew could have handled Akainu by themselves without taking any casualties, they would have went for it. 100% I think they would have went for it. The fact that he didn't pretty much tells me that there was no way that was going to happen at that time period. So he decided to skate, right? But now, and we've seen this before with character, like they don't have no problem running. Like Luffy, I used to talk about all the time. Luffy runs in all of his fights. At some point, I won't say all, but like he ran from Katakuri like half the fight. He ran from Rob Lucci for a little bit. Like this, until he can figure out something. Like he can't sit here and keep taking damage. That's dumb. Let me make some strategic maneuvers until I can figure out how do I beat my opponent. You know what I mean? Type of deal. So it's interesting that now we have an admiral running away, and it's rough for the admirals out here, boy. Not for me though, because I've been saying the same admiral the entire story. He's always been Akainu for me. He's one of my favorite characters. He's top 5 in the verse, in my opinion. And so until he falls or until he gets hold, now if he gets hold, then we're done with this discussion for the end of time. There's really nothing to talk about at that point. But I just don't see Oda doing him like that in particular, just because of how he treated him the entire series. He fought the strongest man in the world, or maybe he was second or third strongest at that time. Even without the other stuff, if they had just 1v1 Whitebeard and Akainu, I think Akainu still would have won just because old age and Whitebeard was already sick. Obviously, Pliant Whitebeard is probably the strongest character that's possibly ever existed. You know what I mean, in the series. But even he would have been beatable if Roger and somebody else, right? Roger, Rayleigh, and some other strong. It was Roger, Rayleigh, and Garp just decided to jump Whitebeard. He's getting stomped out. Like, the fight is over. You know, again, we don't know how nasty Zebek was, but it might have been parts where Garp and Roger was like, yo, let's just jump him. It's very possible that something like that could have went down. Like, hey, you get your dub however you get it. We know in One Piece it's usually 1v1 stuff, but at a certain point, it's no longer 1v1. Again, bringing up Akainu back in Marineford, 1v1 was not a thing for him. Everybody's getting crushed, man. I don't care who you are. If you're in the way, you're not doing what I need you to be doing, then I'm just, hey, Yamamoto getting your side. Burn the ash, man. That's just what I'm about. So I did find it interesting how I don't understand how Akainu is he's a fanboy of Akainu, but he can't follow through the same way. He wasn't supposed to be a Wano in the first place. He decided I'm gonna go do this and it's gonna work this way. And then he got there and it didn't happen because Shanks was like on some you shall not pass type stuff. My man didn't even step off the boat and did that. So this kind of tells me that Shanks, I know we've been making jokes about the film Red promos during the chapter, but there's a chance that the Redhead Pirates just keep it pushing because Wano was never really their destination. It's just between him seeing in the paper and then at some point understanding that Green Bull would be there. Because my thing is, how would he know? Was it just coincidence on timing, or was Shanks aware that Green Bull had went to Wano? Because Green Bull had only told whoever was on the phone, maybe one of his subordinates or something, tell Akainu blah blah blah. But I'm going to Wano because I'm going after Luffy. You know what I mean? Nobody told him to do that. So you're here doing something you're not supposed to be doing, and kind of like what I brought up, he wasn't aware of the attempting to annex Wano. He doesn't know anything about it, and he could have messed up some of the world government's plans because Shanks being there. Let's say the world government has some plan that they was going to want to do right there on the spot. They're not going to do it with Shanks there and the Red Hair Pirates because, again, that's another crew that nobody had Green Bull in their top 10. So I understand why people were over-exaggerating the hype of the Admiral Yonko stuff because it's like, did anybody have Green Bull beating the Stride Pirates by himself? I don't think anybody would. And there's no character in the verse that's probably pulling up on Shanks and soloing Shanks' crew. It's just not going to happen. The story isn't written that way. Again, there's no invincible characters in the story. There's no invincible one-person power in the story. There seems like the ancient weapons might be invincible, but as far as devil fruit abilities, which is Haki in general, we see Shanks, what he's doing with Haki is on some other stuff. Like, I'm kind of wondering if you can use Haki, or especially Conquerors. I've talked about Conquerors being a force multiplier for your other Hakis and other things. Voice of All Things might be combinable with it in some way. Because the only time we've seen people communicate without communicating is through the Voice of All Things. But Shanks was clearly using Haki in this chapter. So it's just like, even though they're not the same, can they be used the same? We know Haki has a signature to it in a way because there's been certain characters in the series when they use it, somebody knows who used it already. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, does Haki have a signature? Like if Big Mom used Conquerors on Whole Cake Island, even if there's other people that can use Conquerors, I guarantee Katakuri would know if it was Big Mom or not who was doing that. You know what I'm saying? So that's kind of how, in my mind, it would work, that it has a signature because everybody's Haki isn't the same. You can use the same type of Haki. We can both have armament, but we both don't have to have advanced armament. You know what I mean? Like, it's just different. At least in my opinion. That's just an opinion, right? That Haki had a signature to it. I've talked about that for years. It just kind of made sense because you hear characters say, oh, that's so-and-so. How did you know that? All right, Curry has the best future sight in the series still. and he only has 5 seconds. So how could you feel someone use conquerors or do something way far away and you're like, oh, that was so and so? Like, how would you know that unless it has a signature to it that we're just not aware of yet? So that's kind of like how I look at it. It doesn't have to be that way. It could be something different. That's fine too. But that's kind of like my idea with that whole thing. So in this case, where Shanks being able to communicate in some way to Green Bull that he needs to go on and keep it pushing, that chapter kind of reminded me of Smoker and Dragon, right? Where Dragon saved Luffy and what he said about Luffy, like, how are you going to stand in the way of a man's departure or something to the effect of that. And then previously, he was never upset about Luffy choosing to be a pirate. He popped up and was like, oh, that's what you want to do? All right, bet. Go do it. Go do it right now. So with Green Bull getting hockey the way he did with the Conquerors, this man tucked his tail and I'm a skedaddle. And I like what Shanks said to him because he basically called him a coward without calling him a coward. He's like, wait a minute. It looks pretty bad that now that there's no Yonko in the situation, you pull up. Like, we don't know what happened between Shanks and Kaido, but we know Shanks had got no problem pulling up nowhere and talking to nobody about nothing. This man stepped in the Goro this man stepped in the Goro's living room, man. Didn't even take his hoodie off when he first came in the building. Oh, he just on some totally disrespectful gangster type stuff until he felt like showing his face. So, it's really interesting. I've never seen a character get turned like this. It was almost WWF like in a way. I'm like, wait a minute, how did you go from beating King and Queen, to, I won't say struggling, but he couldn't one-shot he one-shot Raizo. But I guess he could have probably one-shot them all simultaneously, but he didn't. So it doesn't matter if he could or not. How did we go from that to I'm scared, basically, on some Ben Beckman type stuff and Kizaru, where at least with Kizaru, you don't know if he's trolling or not. Green Bull's not trolling. He just straight up shook. Because ain't no such thing as halfway crooks. As much as I like the Admirals, man, anybody trying to say that this doesn't look bad, I don't know what series you're reading, man. Like, you could never get away with this in real life and not get talked about, right? If you go and try to bully some people and you have an equal show up and then you run away, there's no living that down. You can't go back and like, oh, I would have did this. Well, you had an opportunity, man, and you didn't run it. So even though he says like, oh, I'll fight you, I won't fight you right now, to me it might say if he leaves, if the SSG ain't with Kobe, I think that Green Bull probably has access to it and he gonna bring it back to Wano. Because for how he was, like I said, it's so weird. I get it. He's not a Kainu, but he knows. He specifically talked about the half measures thing, right? On some Eisenberg type stuff. All Green Bull did was half measures. He half measured his way to Wano because, again, he didn't tell nobody he was going of relevance. He didn't tell anybody relevant that he was going, and he didn't ask for help. He didn't say, the only thing he did was like, oh, you know what? I forgot all about that. Actually, he did say send a warship. In my mind, I was thinking like, hey, Shanks might be gone soon. So what stops Green Bull from coming back? Right? Not that it would matter because he'd get clapped by, the Phenom from Fuchsia and the rest of the gang. Like, I forgot about the warship part. I wonder if, it could be though. Like, I wonder if the Red Hair Pirates actually intercepted that warship on the way there. Because Green Bull did call, I don't think I heard anybody talk about that like, this morning or last night. I just remembered it randomly right now. Like, that might be important. That might have been why Green Bull said that. Because of the warship that's supposed to be on the way. Not that it's enough to deal with the Red Hat Pirates, but it's backup. And again, like I was just saying, then it could be the SSG on the way, whatever that may be. It's definitely possible at this point. I just was under the assumption they would be with Kobe, and how I talked about with Kobe is, is he going to have to make a decision that goes against his morals, to to fulfill his duty, so to speak, because the other, like someone like Aokiji, he had to do something that he didn't want to do, but he did it anyway. That was messed up when he killed Saul, right? Garp had to do stuff that he didn't want to do, probably depending on how God's Valley incident was. But we know, especially with at Marineford, he had to do things that he didn't want to do. He was prepared to watch Ace die, like, and not because of the way he died, like the normal execution way. He was prepared for that. He was mad, but he was prepared for it because that's the life that he told them when they was young. Y'all need to be Marines. They said no. So again, Garp, for the credit that people try to give him, Garp has failed in a lot of ways as far as what you would consider a parent in a way of how you approach things, right? Like, I'm not saying it's okay. Like, pirates in this verse don't mean the same thing they do in real life. If this was real life, then yeah, I would probably not have an issue. Like, if it would hurt. But if my son or grandson went out and did some real pirating, like in this world, the way that we consider pirating, he got to go. Even if I got to go do it myself. I can't, we can't allow that. It's just not how we function in society. So I don't know. I just thought that was interesting. And I think that it's looking bad for the Admirals, but not really, because people have always favored the Yonko anyway. And that was something we was talking about last night, that Braga had brought up. Was like, how does this change anything? You guys already favor the Admirals to begin with. So what difference does it make that Green Bull looks the way he does? You guys don't care about the Admirals. You all say they're weak. Now you just say that this is proof. I'm like, yeah, for Green Bull, because he a hoe. We see Aokiji run from somebody before. I know he's not an Admiral now, or at least as far as we know. We ain't never seen him run from nobody. Uzi Tora definitely ain't running from nobody. Now, he might have did some whatever type, like some dress roaster, let Sabo walk type stuff. But again, like I was saying earlier, it might have been a combination of both, him and Green Bull, because it didn't make sense to me. Like, it didn't look like Green Bull was the type to let you get away. But then I thought about it these past 2 chapters. He was given opportunities for the Scabbards to get away if they would have gave him what he wanted. Now, he could have been lying and just, did some sneaky stuff later on, like, oh, okay, well, here's Luffy, and then kill him right in front of Luffy just to agitate him. This is a slime ball character. He's a grimy McGrimerson. You can't trust any character in One Piece to begin with, but you definitely can't trust anybody who's talking about how prejudice is basically the status quo. Like, that's not, you just can't have a guy like that around. But I thought that part was cool. I think that's really it with that stuff. I don't really need to get too much into Shanks because we really don't know technically what he did. We have an idea of what he did. It's really nothing there. Like, it's hype moment, but as far as substance, like, there's hidden stuff there, I'm sure, like with the hockey thing, and then people saying that's Uta in one of the panels and stuff like that. I don't know how I feel about that. Personally, it's not a big deal if it is or not to me personally, just because it'll be explained a little bit if it's in the story. The best example I heard, and what I didn't think about, they compared it to Shiki being canon. I was like, you know what, that kind of makes sense. That's pretty cool if it's done that way, but at the same time, we know how the promotions work, right, in the real world. So I think that was probably it with that. Now, we are going to get into some very interesting territory, because first of all, my man Trafalgar the Goderlaw, what is he doing with his life right now? Because this man, what he looked around, was like, no sukiyaki, huh? And he was just like us a few chapters ago. Hey, we're robbing that though. Everybody doing all this other stuff. We're robbing that. And the next thing you know, he pops up with them. Come on, Law. How did you know where to find them? And then he made what did Sukiyaki say? Something about sniffing them out and calling them a hyena. Or no, Law said, I'm not a hyena. And then I was thinking in my head, yo, did Law follow Robin scent? I'm like, he has been around her quite a bit. And we all know, like, if you're around the opposite gender, our body smells are so different where That's very possible. I don't think Oda would take it that far. I was just from a joke standpoint that I was thinking like, yeah, he followed Robin's scent. Now, y'all know I don't be on no Sanji Sim Smoke type stuff when it comes to the ladies. However, and you know, a lot was pimping it up pretty hard with Robin back in Dressrosa when Robin came outside when it was on the sunny, and she said something. She was talking about basically closure, right? Of because Doflamingo being defeated, right, and then leaving Dressrosa. And Law didn't even say nothing to her. I mean, didn't even look at her and was like, leave me alone, and walked away. It's like, man, this guy is so much like me. But that part, I just like just thinking about that part. But anyway, I'm gonna tell y'all something, man. Again, I'm not a simp smoke, never have been. I don't condone that kind of behavior. I find it comical in Sanji because it's manga, and he reminds me of this old. It was a small series called Golden Boy. Like that's how Sanji literally acts just like that. I think it had to come out in probably the '80s or something, early '90s, but it was only like 6 episodes. But he's definitely him and Sanji are probably blood relatives, and you don't know. But well, yeah, because Sanji to me is like a mix of Lupin the Third and Golden Boy. But not to get too distracted. There's no way, right? I'm using my ability at this time. We're both going through this crawl space, and you are going first, man. That's just what it is, right? Because it's Robin. That's the way it's got to be. You guys don't talk like that very often, but this is the one of the few times it's like, oh, no fair. I'm like, compared to what I would have did, I think you would have preferred the fairness of Law's approach, right? It just, hey, look. But anyway, we see that underwater Wano. And I like the way Sukiyaki worded it because it does make sense. He's like, yeah, you know it was like, how far do we have to go? Oh, a few hundred more years. I like that statement. I thought that was kind of dope. It was a little slick. Like, okay, I see you. And then we see it at like the Atlantis version of Wano at this point. And I ain't gonna lie, man. When I seen the panel, I was more hype on how the panel looked than what it represent because it felt like we went to a new island. Like you know that feel as soon as we get to somewhere. Same way when we got the Onigashima with Law and Kinemon in the gang when they pulled up, right? That felt a certain way. When we first got to Wano, that felt a certain way. So like it had that new island feel, but we didn't even go nowhere. Now what I don't know is how are they going to get in there? Now, Law is broken. We haven't really seen how his abilities interact with water, but you would think, yeah, he'd be able to do something like that, right? Water, even seawater, doesn't stop Devil Fruit powers, right? At all. It's very affectable by Devil Fruit powers. It's just the situation of a user being submerged. You know, that's the only issue. There's nothing that stops Wall from using room between walls. We don't ever really see him do. I don't think I've seen him do that before. To me, it would just make sense based on observation hockey that he should be able to move through, teleport through a wall that without knowing. That's a hard one. I don't even want to get back into that discussion again. But you get my point, right? Law should be able to room and maybe even possibly code himself. I was thinking about that before because his awakening, the Corazon bubble silent thing made me, I had got this idea. I'm like, did he mod his Devil Fruit similar to whatever Queen did? Because that ability doesn't match anything else he does. Like with Luffy in the context of the Gomu Gomu, Red Hawk still made sense, even without knowing about the mythical zone part, if that even really matters. But it made sense. Like you could talk your way through why Red Hawk is what it is, and not just an emotional representation of an attack, right? And that because of that is why Corazon's ability was, Law's, awakening was looked at a certain way because it's like, oh, this is an emotional thing. It came with this attack. I'm like, yeah, but with Luffy it makes sense. With Law it doesn't. The best I can come up with is like, oh, a surgeon needs to work in a room with silence so he's not distracted or things of that nature. But outside of that, that's the is the weirdest ability. This man can produce electricity, radiation. Well, I guess technically those are similar, but he can do all this stuff. The silent bubble is just like what? Like shock will make sense. It's just a variation of counter shock in some way, right? The whatever it was called, Big Willie, Big Willie, uh, that and the Corazon silent bubble, those two things are very different from the rest of his move set. So I was thinking about that because I'm like, well, if Law can swap himself with, like, could he swap the water to the opposite side of the border so they could still access Pluton but still keep the borders of Wano closed? And did surely Momo was aware why of this section. He might not know anything about an ancient weapon, but depending on what Zanisha told him, it kind of makes sense that. I mean, I thought it was cool that indirectly, right, Momo could be potentially keeping the borders closed for. Um, I mean, it has an impact in another way because of the ancient weapon part, whether he knew it about it or not. It just made sense to me that he wanted his borders, wanted the borders of Wano to stay closed because they it's an unstable nation right now, right? Everything they just went through this war and things of that nature. Anybody who comes there is not going to be there for a positive reason. They know Kaido's been defeated. It's all over in the paper. They know Big Mom's defeated. Kaido's been ruling Wano for a couple of decades now. Like even Green Bull said, "Oh, that's what else made him a hoe." Even though it made sense, he like, "Yo, you think if One Clap Kaido was around, you think I would be here right now?" Like, see, you just the hoest of hoes right now, my guy. Like, I can't even say my guy. Like, I just get this guy out of here, man. I don't even see his face or he disgusts me. But I just that this whole situation with Pluton and this water world and even the Jack thing. The first thing I thought about was like, okay, well, maybe as long as it's not saltwater refreshment with the devil fruit can still function to a silver degree. Because in the way that I get that it could have been showing the panel of Jack just to note that we can know like, oh, he's talking about Jack. He just didn't know Jack's name or, whatever. It's really weird because it made it look like, oh, he swam down there. I'm just like, well, that shouldn't be a thing. But at the same time, we don't know if that's possible or not. Remember when he fell in the water, they were in an actual ocean, with salt water, which we know that affects devil fruit users different because that's what Karyoseki is made out of. I won't say it's made out of, but it's the same active component of whatever. Even if you want to just say salt, that's fine. Same thing that kills zombies, right? It would make sense. But anyway, the active component that, is a problem for devil fruit users, right? If you take the same person and you put them in fresh water, it might not be an issue. Because even though, not to get too technical, because there is a difference between the word submerged, right? Like it means something different in technical terms, but it won't, just a common use of the word. Luffy back in All Along Park body, his body's still stretched because his head is above water, which even by One Piece standards kind of is, it's kind of sketchy. But I couldn't remember off the top of my head what type of water he was in and if that matters or not, right? Because if that's something that's been in the story silently we haven't really been paying attention to, that's a different situation. I get Luffy's not a fisherman, but that's kind of the concept that I was thinking of with that. Because other than that, he just didn't have a devil fruit at the time, But it just seems like he's had his for a while. But then I thought about it. I'm like, well, Jack didn't really do anything crazy with his ability. Like, not, you know what I'm saying? Like, he could transform at will, but it wasn't, there was nothing broken there, like Kaido or something. So it's like, well, he might have just not had a fruit. That I could believe. But if he did have a fruit when he went down there, Dr. Vegapunk got some explaining to do. You know what I mean? But we'll see. I don't know. What was I don't know. Did I bring that up already? I seen a comment, and I like the way they explained the situation with the Pluton. They referred to a situation in another series where they were like, these people to do what they needed to do, they lost their defense to gain offense. And I'm like, well, that's the same, that concept has been in the story already because that's what happened with King and the Zoro fight because of the way his flames work. Like, see, I talk about the Song Pirates until you start hearing sirens and stuff. But he sacrificed basic offenses for defense. And that's what Wano would have to do. And it's like, why would Odin want to do that? Why would he want Pluton to be released if it's meant to be used for something destructive? Well, why not just keep the borders closed? But you have to wonder, like I was saying before, a long time ago, does the world government, do they play a role in Wano's isolation? As in, they want Wano to be an isolated nation. That's why they left them like this entire time until it was convenient for them to do something different. We all know as soon as a group is ready to do something extreme, they start behaving differently, right? They never talked about Wano or annexing, and then all of a sudden that just popped up. You know what I mean? And then now we learn Pluton. It's like with Shanks here. Like I said, I think Shanks and them just keep it pushing. I did the it's just a very interesting situation. And then I was thinking about in the context of Toki, I'm like, well, Toki has to be from when Wano was at sea level, given the time period, and a lot has changed since then. And then what are these walls made out of? Because they're called walls if they would have said like the mountainside is what blocks this and that. But I don't know. That part might not be mattered. But it's just like, well, one, how do you destroy the walls? Are we getting a preview of the old theories for the Grand Line being destroyed, or actually the Red Line being destroyed? Is that what we're doing here? I don't know. You tell me. But all it man, it's really fascinating to me. The part of the story and what has to happen, and all the things we know. More questions leading to more answers, and then when we get answers, it just leads to more questions. Like, why is law so concerned about Robin and Sukiyaki's location? Like, oh, I'm missing out on something, and then because then Robin was like, yo, we got 3 polyglyphs, and then I bet our Law was sitting there on some, no, comrade, we have 3 or some stuff like that. Who knows with him? I've been saying for a little bit, if Law is evil, so is Shanks, because they're a package deal. And really just only based off of Greenford, because it still makes no sense to me that Shanks trusted him. And I wonder if Shanks knew that if Law was a D already. I'll talk about the other stuff another time, but that's something I was thinking about. Like, it's very interesting that Shanks pulls up and now Law is gone. Law's down there with the poneglyph stuff. Dealing with the Pluton, to learn about Pluton and whatnot. And, that's really sketchy. The other thing I was thinking about, I was like, if they had Odin's journal, right, wouldn't they be able to have a better idea on how to deal with this situation? And Yamato's right outside. So it's kind of funny that it would be different if Yamato was all the way in another country, or Momo was away, or still in Dressrosa or something, went back to Dressrosa, and for whatever reason, right, and had the logbook with him. The logbook is probably like 5 minutes away, and it might change everything about this situation. So now that Green Bull is quote unquote gone, at least until he returns back with a warship. I would expect that, like, at some point, Sukiyaki, Law, and Robin go back to the main group, right? And they just talk randomly or whatever. You know what? Has Robin read Orange Journal? She's probably somebody who really needs to read Orange Journal. I don't remember if she's seen it before. I don't think so. I don't think Yamato and Robin have met yet. Have they? I don't think they've been shown together. Huh. I don't know. I'll have to go back a few chapters and make sure about that. But those 2 characters in Law together, or at least the logbook, Robin and Law, something will get done. We just don't know what or how. And it's just, what a time to be in One Piece, man. What a time to be in the series. I'm sure, even though I want to talk more, I can't really think of nothing off the top of my head anymore. Besides the last panel, right? That was one of the best parts of the chapter. Because this whole time, man, our team, man, the squad, was just sitting there the whole time, knew exactly what was going on. Like, oh, they got this, man. Again, like I was saying earlier, Luffy wants Momo to be his own man just as much as Momo does. Um, and I really like that part of the end of the chapter. You know, they were just sitting there posted up, like they didn't even know who Green Bull was or nothing. He didn't even matter. It didn't even matter who it was. It doesn't matter. It wasn't gonna matter though. They let the people of Wano who couldn't stand on their own for so long due to circumstance. Now they're in a situation to try to stand on their own. But they was on standby. Oh, Luffy had them hands ready. He was ready to throw some hands. He ain't fought in a week. I don't even know when's the last time he's went a week without fighting in the series. It's been a while. So he's probably actually ready to get that work in. And you already know Zoro wake up fighting. That's just what he does, you know. It was cool to see, and I liked how Zoro was like, "Oh, check out Momo." I'm like, "Look at Zoro, man, talking about his brother-in-law." You already know what time it is, man. That's Southside Shimosuke Village in the building right there. But I'm looking forward to, besides the obvious stuff with the ancient weapons of Pluton, I'm still looking forward to, because like if you think about, like I was saying earlier, if Green Bull doesn't come back and there's no warship, Shanks leaves, they don't have a reason to be in Wano anymore other than figuring out what's going on with the situation with Pluton. You know, go get Frankie. You know, maybe he, from building the counter Pluton, he would have had to have known something about the Pluton, so it would make sense to him. Um, them three are not enough. As crazy as that sounds, they need either the logbook or there has to be a way. Um, but yeah, I think that's it, man. We're probably gonna talk again. Thanks for stopping by. Obviously, I ran a little longer than usual, but this chapter was just this is game breaker, man. This is one of those game breakers where it just changes everything. Seeing that diagram of what Wano looked like, you know, and how big to scale what the walls on the side are, and having it being called oh, it's been asleep. Like, see, this is the playtime, man, talking about it sleep. Why did he use that word? Why couldn't he just said it's been down here for X amount of time? He had to specifically use the word sleep, which is something that I probably need myself pretty soon because I've been up. I think I got 2 hours and since like the chapter drop. Actually, before that, I've probably been up since like 4 a.m. the day before or something. I don't know. Time started just like non-existing. But I've been enjoying every minute of it, man. And I hope y'all did too. You know, like I said, we'll talk again soon as usual. Hope y'all safe out there. Enjoy your weekend. Enjoy your streams. I'm gonna have to catch up and hear what the fraud got to say. You already know, just based on last night, people were so hyped for what Cole is gonna say. I mean, I'm always hyped for Cole. Who doesn't love Cole? But he gonna have a whole lot of trash to talk. Ooh, it's gonna be a long weekend for people who take that stuff too seriously. They gonna be bad salty. I'm gonna get my popcorn and I'm gonna be ready, boy. But y'all be easy. Maybe we're here tomorrow. Probably not. More like Monday or Tuesday, something like that. Because I have some other stuff I want to talk about based on this chapter, on some ideas like I was talking about with Lion Shanks. So that'll be that. Peace.